All right, I want to start by saying thank you for coming today. My mom and Nora and I have really felt the love and support always, but especially in this last month. And my dad was diagnosed with cancer over 20 years ago when I was about 17. It was fast moving and the prognosis was unknown, but it didn't look good. And he and my mom spent hours researching doctors and treatment options, and they ended up choosing a really good path, and the timing was on our side. New and better treatments became available exactly when he needed them. And the treatments were still hard, but the hard times were temporary. And time after time, he recovered and went back to work, and he regained his strength, and he went back to playing tennis and golf and traveling and doing projects. Losing him has been so hard, and I'm so sad. And I've had a couple moments of feeling like this wasn't fair, or even feeling like a little angry. But underneath that, I just feel really lucky. So from my perspective, the clock started in 2005 when I was 17. And when it stopped in September, it just showed that I got a whole extra lifetime with him. And it wouldn't be honest to say that I knew how lucky I was every moment of the past 20 years, or that I always listened to him with the respect that he deserved. But I can say that for the past couple of years, I thought about this gift every day. And for the past year, I've thought about it 100 to 1,000 times a day. And then for honesty's sake, I have to say that there's about a total of 20 minutes this summer that I wasn't the maximum amount of grateful. And that was when I was pretty sure he was going to get us detained by TSA in the Bozeman airport. And then another time that I thought he was being a little harsh about my pizza cooking technique. And my dad had an excellent last year on Earth, or at least the best year that's possible with the chemo, and then all the times. He traveled to Italy and Montana and Oregon, San Diego, Tucson, and to Cornucopia, Wisconsin several times, very many times. He spent really special time with each of his siblings, and he attended big family gatherings with all the relatives, and he went out for coffee countless times. He and I did fun things together over the past year, and a lot of boring errands. And sometimes, usually when we were in the car, we talked about the practical parts of dying. He and my mom took care of a lot of the paperwork and the admin. I don't know all of the things that they took care of. I didn't have to know. But we really got stuck on the idea of an obituary and a celebration of life. A direct quote from my dad was, "Oh, I don't think I need one of those." And then a direct quote from my mom was, "Too bad, Mark." So we did get some details out of him about what he might like. So today we are doing our best. And my instinct is to get up here and go on and on about what a good dad Nora and I had, and talk about him for hours, and to give multiple examples of his good eye, his patience, and how far out of his way he would go for a good view, and that he would never get lost on the way to the view, because part of his visual and spatial genius was that he was incredible at reading maps. He always knew where he was. And talk about how he loved a rough draft or a proof of concept, and that even after he finished a project, he was thinking about how he would do it better next time. Sometimes he picked up those projects 20 years later and finally finished them in his eyes. And I'd want to tell a story, a really long story, about how twice in my life he removed the main light in my bedroom and replaced it with a ceiling fan with no light. And how both times he said something like, "You're welcome. Now you'll finally be able to work on some good lighting." And I have other stories about how funny he was and how you really had to be listening to catch his best humor. And I'd want to share stories about all the times he helped people with projects and arrangements, and how he really didn't want anything in return. And his post-retirement goal was to never get paid to do anything ever again. And my mom and I were talking last night, and she said that she'd call that more of a lifetime goal for him. But it wasn't important to him that people realized what a good deal they were getting out of him while he achieved that goal. But I know that there's a lot of people here today who really did appreciate that. We're trying to abide by his wishes, so I can't talk about all those things for hours. He thought going on and on about how great somebody was a little embarrassing and suspicious. We talked about his, and he said it shouldn't need to be said over and over again because people should just be able to tell and that it should be obvious. And I think his perspective won't be a surprise for many people that are here today. So we are all going to go on and on about how much we loved him and how great he was. But we are going to keep it short and pretty casual. And I'm just going to end by saying that I loved him very much. I always felt very loved by him. And then I'm happy to tell any of these stories at great length anytime, but it's going to be off the mic. And now we have a couple other speakers. Who is up next? I think it's Ken, number 2.
I also have written marks, although most of them are crossed out. Really? Can you hear me now? Most of the people are also faithful. Okay, we can do that. I'd like to share a few words about my dear friend Mark. I met Mark about 40 years ago when our wives, as well as Stuart Schachter's wife, all worked together at a speech and language program, and we became good friends, did lots of stuff together. Back then, Mark was the quiet one in the group, the guy who didn't say much, but when he did, it was usually something funny and perfectly timed. He had that understated sense of humor that could catch you completely off guard. Mark was a woodworker early on in his career, and he made us our kitchen cabinet, and I just found out we got it for free. Back then, Mark was I already said that one. Okay. Over the years, Mark and I did many things together. We sometimes in groups, sometimes just together. We went skiing in Colorado. We did biking. I was part of the biking group is here. And sometimes they would invite me to come along with them. And Mark was a real gentleman. I couldn't bike as fast as those guys. Particularly the women liked to go fast. And so he would drop back and he would keep me company, which was nice. What else? Mark was good at all the things that he did. He had a USTA tennis championship with I think it was 55 and over. He ran marathons, and this again is apocryphal. I think he said that he didn't train for one of those. He played basketball at Mac during lunch, and one of our tennis friends said that's where he met Mark, and that Mark was a danger on the court. Competing with Mark was like competing with a super athlete. He'd beat you and somehow make you feel good about it. And as you can already notice, he was liked by multiple groups. And everybody liked Mark. Oops. Can you still hear me? Okay. Mark traveled everywhere. We usually weren't invited. But in 2020, they went to Oaxaca and invited the other two from the teaching group to go with them, and it was very nice. They also, their reports of what they did was amazing. I don't know if you saw pictures back there, but they had pictures of in Cambodia going off into the jungle with some guide. They're still here though. As far as activities, we did pick up pickleball. We played for about 6 years, and they picked it up within the last couple of years at the Y. So the first time we played, we actually beat them. But that was the last time. Through it all, what really stood out was about how Mark was with his calm strength. He lived for years with his prostate cancer and went through countless treatments, and he always came back just the same guy. He also practiced meditation, and that was one of the other things. He seriously practiced meditation. He did one of those 10-day silent retreats, 10 days without talking. I wouldn't last 30 minutes. Mark was my friend for 4 decades, and I'll always remember his humor, his humility, and the quiet way he made every moment better. Whether we were on a ski slope, a tennis court, or standing in a stream with a fly rod, trying to convince the fish that we knew what we were doing. I will miss him terribly. Number 3, please.
Hi, I'm Mary Hark, and I knew Mark from my years teaching fibers at McAllister. Can you hear? Okay, sorry. I know Mark from teaching. I taught fibers for 18 years at McAllister. And I want to start out by reading a message that was sent to me this week from Anna Battistini, who was a student during my time at my tenure at McAllister. Anna eloquently describes what so many of us observed and experienced. From Anna. Mark Holte was one of the kindest people I've ever known. In a building full of big personalities, he was the calm heart at the center, keeping everything moving forward. He was a role model for me and for all of us, showing how to be a source of knowledge and a helpful resource for others. When people asked me what I wanted to do after McAllister, I usually said, I want to be Mark Holte. Seeing someone lead and teach with calm openness and integrity showed me the kind of person I wanted to be. I spent at least one summer as Mark's assistant in the art department. I cleaned out sawdust collectors, swept and scraped all summer long. I remember riding my bike home at the end of the day, covered in sweat and sawdust sticking to my skin. It was a tough job, but he was so fun to work for, and he made it all worth it. He taught me the basics of wood shop. I remember sanding a paper press for days, going methodically through all the grits, using a tack cloth to clean it and varnish it, making sure no brush hairs got stuck in the finished piece. We constructed painting canvases and built frames, really whatever the art department faculty needed. It seemed like he could make anything. For me, this was the education I craved, and the education I still use every day as I sculpt, teach, and renovate my house in northern Minnesota. And what an absolute gift it was, especially as a young woman in the shop, to learn skills from someone who never looked down on us, never judged us for not knowing how to use a tool. I know he affected so many lives, and in my class of 2003, he gave so many young women the skills, confidence, and support they needed to create their ideas and bring their visions to life. I thank Mark Holte and all he gave to us, the students of McAllister College. Our education was often cerebral and idealistic, but he grounded us by teaching skills that allowed us to create things that worked in the real world. For me, that balance was essential to my education, and for him, I will always be grateful. That was from Anna. I was one of those art faculty who needed things, who had ideas for projects in and beyond the classroom that depended on expertise well beyond my own skill set to be realized. Mark was always game. I can't ever remember a time when he shared any hint of being reluctant or tired of so many asks. In the last couple of weeks, I've remembered so many different projects that Mark and I worked on together. I just like to share quickly two. First, in my Fibers 1 class at McAllister, students learn to dye lengths of fabric 3 yards at a time. Starting with a black cloth, they work to take color out and put color in using a variety of processes and ending up with yards of just gorgeous cloth. But what do you do with that cloth after it's been shown off hanging in the hallway outside the department? Mark worked with those students, helping them to build beautiful, sturdy wooden folding screens to hold the cloth. These kids had never used a saw or a drill, had never sanded and finished wood. Mark expertly taught these rank beginners to do this work properly. He mentored them through the whole process from designing through fabrication and finishing. And these folding screens, holding their richly colored fabric, were a finished product that was so much more than these students ever thought they'd be able to construct with their own hands. Truly beautiful. Over the years, I bet at least 5 students who've contacted me or who I've run into share that they have not only kept those screens, but have them on display in their homes. Mark was a steady, skilled, attentive educator whose presence in the department was profoundly impactful. And the other project I wanted to share is more personal. While I was teaching at Mac, I was able to acquire 2 Hollander beaters. This is the machine that makes paper pulp, and I'm a paper maker. These vintage machines needed a lot of repair. Despite being a project that was perhaps pushing the boundaries of what Mark should have been expected to take on, he was all in on the idea of rehabbing the machines in the department. So with his encouragement, we brought them into the sculpture studio at Mac. It turned out one of his work study students at the time had recently rebuilt a VW bug engine with her father and had some newly acquired expertise, or at least enthusiasm, for machines. Mark assigned her to my project, and the 3 of us took those machines completely apart, sandblasted everything, greased, repainted, and reassembled. It was a big job, well beyond anything I could have taken on by myself. The 3 of us, with Mark as our fearless leader, rebuilt them with only a few extra unidentified nuts and bolts left over at the end. It was an education for me. We had to figure things out together. It was serious and fun working it out with Mark. And despite my naivete concerning tools and machine parts, Mark helped me to feel like a real co-conspirator as we figured out how to reassemble those machines. He led, but he brought me along, and he gave agency to the work-study student who was on the job with us. As we worked together over several months, I experienced from the inside out what a masterful teacher Mark was, and what an exceptional person. This last week, my friend and old colleague from McAllister, Stanton Sears, and I have had several conversations about Mark and what he meant to so many of us. Stan taught sculpture and 3D design at Mac, and Mark, as a technical supervisor in the shop, was an invaluable colleague to Stan. Mark assisted in Stan's classes, bringing his considerable knowledge, skill, and uncommonly perceptive ability to mentor students as they develop their projects. Stan lives in Vermont now, but he sent me the following and asked me to share it with everybody today. So this is from Stan. When I learned that Mark passed away, I went hunting for photographs. I found some, but not many. A few of him as a model dressed up in a rented old-fashioned police officer's outfit for a memorial project I was working on. And another of Mark and a daughter helping us with the installation of an artwork on a hospital roof. Mark was always a quietly enthusiastic participant. He contributed essential support, lining up the equipment, organizing the transportation. He was an essential part of field trips with the students. Initially, as I looked for photos, I was puzzled by how little he showed up in my collection from that time at McAllister, but then I realized he was always present as the photographer. For an end of the semester field trip to install student sculpture in the fields surrounding my rural studio, or for the large public art fire events on the shores of Lake Pepin, in addition to bringing the tools and driving the van, Mark was documenting the events. To this day, some of the things I keep readily available to show people are a series of photographic calendars that Mark made over the years. He, along with his crew of work-study assistants, would take the photos and design the calendars. I treasure this collection, not only as evidence of so many projects and experiences, but as evidence of Mark's always kind, quiet, helpful presence. The calendars are a memory of Mark and remind me how much he contributed to the overall experience in the art classes at Macalester, making it magical. Mark contributed significantly to my work as a teacher and supported my art projects well beyond our shared classroom. In a time of low bars, Mark is a high bar, and I will miss him. That's from Stan Sears. I was lucky to spend a morning having coffee with Mark just a week before he left us. We remembered our dear friend, Gabrielle Ellertson, reminisced about working with Jerry Rudquist. We caught up on news about shared colleagues and friends, about our families. After I left Macalester 18 years ago, Mark was still a touchstone for me. I was lucky to see him a couple times a year, to hear stories about the department and share what my life in Madison was like at the university. Mark was the kind of person who made all of us feel like we wanted to sit next to him. He knew how to be a good friend. He was a fully present listener who didn't judge, but still had opinions. I learned so much from him about tools, yes, but really about how to be a better person. I feel so blessed to have had him in my life, first as such a great colleague, and then as a dear friend. Like Stan and so many of us, I will really miss him.
Thank you. Our family appreciates and is grateful for all of the kind thoughts, prayers that has been expressed over the past few weeks, and of course for coming today. I've been very fortunate to have been Mark's younger brother. You'll notice my comments will have a lot to do with what's already been said. It's pretty consistent. He taught me a lot about life. Mark lived life with quiet dignity and was a man who had a gentle soul. Mark loved Pat, Claire, and Nora dearly. You can see that when you look at the photos that he is in with them. Pat describes him as always being good with who he was, whether it was outside of the box or in the middle of the box. Mark gave that acceptance to others as well. Mark has been a good friend and mentor to me and has been an important formational influence for who I have become. This afternoon, I wanted to share a little bit about who I saw Mark to be. Mark was cool and had a calm presence about him. Everybody liked Mark and thought he was a good guy. Even dogs loved Mark. Of course, that might have had something to do with the fact that Mark always seemed to have a dog treat in his pocket. My friend Jay said while growing up that Mark was the coolest guy he knew. He did things at his own way and had a perspective on life that was different from most. And although he was very socially astute, he didn't seem to care all that much about what others thought about him. This is a tribute, and as such, the idea isn't to paint a balanced, objective picture of a person. But I did a mental exercise anyway about what I might say if I did give a balanced portrait of Mark. I couldn't come up with much on the other side of the ledger, except maybe from time to time, he might express a hint of impatience or frustration if I was a little slow on the uptake about something. So other than being cool, let me highlight a few other characteristics of Mark and the way he lived his life. My sisters recalled their very early memory of our mom, Bev, chasing Mark and Tim around the yard in Blue Earth with a belt because they were always so rambunctious. Our mom had recounted her version of this to me later, confirming the chasing part, but admitting that she never actually caught them and usually had to turn away in laughter as she gave up the chase. Family was very important to Mark, and not just Pat, Claire, and Nora. He spent time with and embraced the Hardy clan, his brothers and sisters, and nieces and nephews. Mark and Pat's relationship with our daughter Samantha is like that of a second set of parents, built over time traveling together and hanging out together over the years. Mark had a natural charisma about him. Growing up, our grandma Molly lived with us, and he had her wrapped around his finger. Molly could get a little crotchety at times, but not with Mark. Mark could do no wrong. Mark had a way of making people feel valued and loved. Mark's superpower was making the people he was with seem like the long-lost best friend he couldn't wait to reconnect with. As others have mentioned, Mark was funny. I sense he used humor to put people at ease, draw attention away from himself, and diffuse social situations. A recent example is when we were in Italy last fall, a trip Marco, as we called him in Italy, made with Sister Joyce, Samantha, and others. Pretty much every morning, Marco walked a mile or so up the hill to a coffee shop in a quaint and picturesque little village to get what Mark referred to as a coffee, which could have been a latte, macchiato, or whatever his current favorite caffeinated beverage was. The proprietor of this coffee shop, who spoke virtually no English, was aloof, though cordial enough, but didn't seem to be much of a fan of tourists like us. Nevertheless, Mark would engage with him every morning, trying to somehow communicate with him, having no language in common. One morning, Mark finally cracked the stiff facade of this guy when, seeing a donut in the bakery case, he ordered a donato with his cappuccino. The guy just paused and smirked at Mark, and every morning after that, the proprietor was outwardly engaging and attentive to our needs. As others have said, Mark loved to travel, and he and Pat traveled a lot together, and as was written in the form, they traveled for months early in their relationship, and they even included Berlin, East Berlin. In addition to the biking trips, they went to Asia, Turkey, Mexico, Costa Rica, and various other places. Mark was a visual processor and a creator with a keen sense of design. Many times when I wasn't understanding what he was describing, he would pull out a notebook and draw a picture for me. Mark communicated his plan for the recent addition to our cabin with a model made from a pizza box when we were staying in Costa Rica during COVID, and that is exactly what we built. He also designed and built a canoe by hand. Mark was progressive, not in his politics, well, maybe a little there as well, but progressive in the sense he embraced new ideas and ways of doing things. While what was floating around in his head was often a mystery, he invited others into his creation by asking them for design ideas, teaching them and supporting their own ways of creation. He didn't like dwelling on the past, as his orientation always seemed to be on the present and on the future.
Is this it?
Yeah.
Mark believed he could do almost anything he wanted to. He just needed to figure out how to do it. I've seen him watch the same YouTube video 10 times. If Mark got stuck on something, it was not uncommon for him to get a coffee and go on the internet or look at a book and figure out whatever it was he was stuck on. He would rarely give up on something and was comfortable with it and good at playing the long game to accomplish what he had his mind set on. That optimism and tenacity was infectious. For better or for worse, because of the time I spent working with Mark, I now believe I can do almost anything. I just need to figure out how to do it. Scary, I know, but that's the kind of affect Mark emanated. He had a way of getting along with people. He knew how to roll with things and be accommodating to a point. One story from a long time ago that has become family lore is when many of us went out to dinner for Mark's birthday. The group included Grandma Pearl, who was a staunch teetotaler. Mark was certainly aware of the family norm of not drinking alcohol in the presence of Grandma Pearl and wasn't one to inject drama into situations just for kicks. When it came time to order, Mark ordered a glass of Burgundy, at which point everybody at the table became silent and stared at their placemat. The problem was Mark was a vegetarian at the time and taken to Rudolph's barbecue for his birthday dinner. Mark also gave generously of his considerable talents and skills. When Jeff and Ellie were going to construct a timber frame for their home at the North House Folk School, Mark showed up with his considerable building and construction knowledge, along with an unwavering willingness to give of himself completely. For 11 days, he worked shoulder to shoulder, lifting beams, cutting tenons and mortises, mentoring and encouraging from beginning to end. The completed frame stands as a testament to both his craftsmanship and his generous spirit. I could go on. We will miss Mark dearly. While it's true that losing Mark leaves a large void in our lives that will never fully heal, it's also true that through his character, instruction, and life example, his legacy will live on through the way he has changed, for the better, many of us here today. I know this is true for me.
I'm gonna read a poem today, When I Am Among the Trees by Mary Oliver. When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness, I would almost say they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me, the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches. And they call again. "It's simple," they say, "and you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy,
The
to be
best
filled with light,
speed,
and to
meaning
shine."
That concludes our program for this evening or this afternoon. I think we still have a lot of the beautiful programs that Mary made for us, and so don't skip one of those on your way out. We have a little bit more time to talk and have some food. And thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it.